Hello, you're watching the news from Kazakhstan. I'm Askar Sherlief, and these are the top stories. Unmistakable déjà vu. Little-known professor proposes to extend presidential term to another 10 years. Experts call the adoption of the law on the leader of the nation the most negative event of 2010. Families of inmates picket the parliament demanding to stop tortures in Kazakh prisons. All hints of officials that the current leader of the nation will serve for another 10 years received their first confirmation on Thursday. An initiative group of the country's citizens gathered in Ust-Kamenogorsk and forwarded an idea of a referendum to extend the powers of President Nazarbayev until 2020. Little was known about the meeting, with delegates representing 14 regions as well as Astana and Almaty. Reporters were first gathered in the city administration and later brought to the former culture center, which they were not allowed to leave until the end of the event. Everything played out in the very familiar matter when a little-known rector of the Semey State University, Erlan Sidikov, suddenly threw the idea of a referendum in the air. The professor said that it was his own initiative to file a request for this forum back on December 10th. In a similar fashion, Professor Zakridin Baydosov first voiced the idea of a life presidency for Nursultan Nazarbayev. A referendum extending president's term by 5 years was already held in Kazakhstan in 1995. Today, the reasons for the nation's leader to stay in the office until he is 80 were voiced by the poet Olzhas Suleymenov. Find out more from the next report.
The gathering was prepared in tight secrecy with only select few reporters invited. The issue at stake was not disclosed to anyone. The administration staff either pretended or really didn't know what was going on. This looked like a very secret event. 850 people from across the entire Kazakhstan were gathered in the hall of the former culture center. When the speaker said that the Kazakhstan doesn't actually need presidential elections, the room drowned in ovations. I called the president to go on. The show had to go on as well, and now the participants seemed unstoppable. For 2 hours they listed Nazarbayev's achievements. The audience frequently got up and applauded the most flattering of tributes and metaphors praising the nation's leader. Like Peter the Great, he built a magnificent capital defending the independence and statehood of our country like Lincoln, signed the Constitution like Jefferson, and he's as firm as Margaret Thatcher. The eventual conclusion was that Kazakhstan, on its current development path led by its strong leader, doesn't need to distract the head of state and his team from solving important state issues and spend extra money for the elections. It was even clearly stated that the results are known ahead of time anyway. All of you know the results anyway. The question is whether he can get over 80 or 90% of the votes. It is hardly wise to spend millions of dollars and nerves of all candidates for the preparation of the elections and voting itself. The decision to hold a referendum was approved unanimously on the spot. Then it was explained why Ust-Kamenogorsk was chosen as a tribune. The main initiator of the idea, the rector of the Semey University, Erlan Sidikov, said the east of the country was already especially loyal to the head of state, and the local population wished him long years in the office. Interestingly, Ust-Kamenogorsk residents didn't even know what was going on right in the center of the city. The constitution should not be violated, otherwise everything will collapse. I support the initiative since we have stability and work, and there's no war. We definitely have voted on that, and it's time to give the chair to someone younger.
Later in the day, the entire staff and student body of Taraz State University was gathered for a meeting with the delegation in Ust-Kamenogorsk.
The meeting participants talked about the necessity of a referendum over the prolongation of the president's term until 2020. No one was allowed to leave the meeting, which lasted until late evening. It seems that the initiative group, which is collecting 200,000 signatures within the framework of the political campaign, was urgently initiated around the country. Already on Friday, this group will arrive to Astana to meet with university students from the capital.
Interestingly, the discussion on the initiation of a referendum takes place when most of the population is busy with Christmas and New Year preparations. Experts say this prevents people from fully grasping the incoming information. In the meantime, the call of the initiative group from Ust-Kamenogorsk is already answered by the Almaty mayor Ahmedjan Yesimov, who supported the idea and said the forum was an important event in the history of the country. To quote the official:
"This is not only important for Nursultan Nazarbayev, but for the entire society and for Kazakhstan's development. The leader of nation is a binding factor of our country which will promote the development of inter-ethnic state."
Member of Parliament Zagipa Baliyeva went even further. In her interview to Tengri News, the former Justice Minister and the head of the Central Elections Commission said she would raise the question of extending the president's term to 2030. It is not really clear if Baliyeva realizes that by that time Nazarbayev will turn 90 years old. Here is what the MP said.
"People have no interest in political clashes. They need stability, quiescence and peace. I think that Nazarbayev is able to provide that."
The news of the new extended term for the 70-year-old Nursultan Nazarbayev didn't really surprise the country's political establishment. Opponents of the nation's leader say they expected the initiative since the moment October pensioner Zakriddin Baydosov came up with the idea of life presidency for Nazarbayev.
The leader of communists called the forum on the extension of presidential term a farce. Vladislav Kostarev was surprised not so much by the news on the initiative, but rather by the secrecy of this important event. The politician condemns the idea. "This is a step towards monarchy and changing of the state order. Things like that never end well. Comrade Nazarbayev should stay away from such plots." The leader of the moderate party Akjol Alikhan Baymenov was not surprised by the news as well. He says everything was long leading up to perpetrating the head of the ruling party as a president. "This seems to be serious since the heavy artillery is at use. Only the president can stop this now." Patriot Kasimov learned about the initiation of Kazakh public activists from reporters in the parliament. His only concern is how the new idea will reflect on president's words about the sanctity of the constitution, which specifies the electivity of the head of state. "I don't think there is a need for separate conferences. We just have to employ the view of the head of state." Unexpectedly, the leadership of the ruling party seemed obvious to the idea on the extension of Nazarbayev's term. The political council's secretary, the nephew of the nation's leader, Kairat Satybaldiyev, says he didn't know about the population's initiative, but fully supports his uncle and the party leader. "As a party leader and a citizen, I feel the president has done a lot and must do even more for the country and people." So far, Kairat Satybaldiyev is the only party leader in Astana who spoke in support of the referendum. None of the party members have doubts it will take place. The campaign to discuss the idea of the national referendum will be launched in Astana on Friday, although Nazarbayev's opponents can already say how it will turn out.
News agency Kastag reports that the Social Democratic Party Azad already appealed to President Nazarbayev, asking him to decline the population's initiative of a referendum.
"We insistently urge the president of the country to rise above all momentary temptations, manifest political wisdom and civic responsibility, and stop destructive provocation initiatives. The National Social Democratic Party Azad considers absolutely intolerable any forms of establishment of irremovable power in Kazakhstan."
The news prompted analysts to raise the question of who will benefit from the referendum and who was behind the idea of a forum in Ust-Kamenogorsk.
A referendum through referendum. Members of the unregistered party Alga look at the well-staged play in the Ust-Kamenogorsk former culture center through the prism of recent events. In early autumn, Alga planned to hold a plebiscite, completely opposite to the one initiated in eastern Kazakhstan. Back then they didn't have enough delegates, as most of them simply didn't make it to Almaty, intimidated by the authorities. 22 delegates representing the movement Leave Housing to People never left the city because their leader was told that if they will participate in the conference, they will be immediately evicted. This is how strong the authorities felt against the referendum on the motion to censure Nazarbayev and prevented the Congress from having a quorum. Now the opposition is witnessing how Nur Otan's supporters work on their own alternative referendum in eastern Kazakhstan. Bulat Abilov believes the frenzy with a 70-year-old president whose powers could be extended until he's 80 or even 90 is created by his own entourage. It is advantageous for everyone to leave the head of state for another 10 years. Different groups do fight each other for the better opportunity to influence the president, but their views regarding the eternal rule coincide. The situation is seen as the continuation of a elite struggle by analyst Maxim Kaznachev. He says that last year the president's inner circle was actively developing recipes for Nazarbayev's political longevity. The three most popular are the elections, amendments to constitution making the leader of the nation the key figure with president serving only a technical role, and the referendum to extend the authorities of the first president. The expert, however, believes Nazarbayev could reject such a new year president, once again playing in democracy. President knows well that in current formats of political process, he can easily win the elections in 2012, and there is no need to change the legal format. The first step towards saving state assets otherwise spent for elections was proposed last year by Darkhan Kalitaev, back when he chaired the ruling party Nuratan. Just like now, the proposal on the eternal presidency was presented as initiated by the loving population. I raised all issues about the leader of the nation because deep inside my soul I believe in my rectitude. Observers believe that the elite now justifies the recent developments by Astana's triumph declared by Nazarbayev at the closing press conference for the OSCE summit, while ignoring all the summarizing statements of other delegates. The final documents sounded more like an apology for failing to solve problems, but the president's words reflected only praise and jubilation. The events in Ust-Kamenogorsk are following the logic of Kazakhstan regime of the first decade of this century. Everything was leading up to it. All the attempts to keep Nazarbayev in power for an infinite number of times are the links in one and the same chain. This is where the logic stops, say experts, since a strong politician is never afraid of elections, even if they come at a price. After all, the administration was never short for money anyway.
The law on the leader of nation introduced in Kazakhstan in a similar way to the referendum initiative is called by analysts the most negative political event of 2010. The new status allows Nazarbayev to intervene in internal politics of the country at any time. On Thursday, the Political Decisions Institute presented the results of its expert poll with their view on 2010 and forecast for 2011.
The key tendency is the increase of inter-elite clashes and the strengthening of nationalistic moods, which was noted by 30.8% of respondents. 26.6% noted the strengthening of nationalistic moods and 18.5% noted the increase of pressure of mass media by the state. Among other political events that received negative evaluation of experts include the strengthening of inter-clan wars for spheres of influence, the decision to send Kazakh soldiers to Afghanistan and provision of air corridor to the USA. Concerning the forecast for the next year, the survey respondents anticipate the early parliamentary elections and activation of opposition during the pre-election period, the change of the government, the head of the president's administration and the foreign affairs minister. However, political analysts do not exclude the possibility that the most symbolic event will be the referendum on the prolongation of President Nazarbayev's term. The head of state fears the negative influence of inter-elite tendencies connected with the recent intergroup showdown, including the so-called conspiracy of the Southerners, which might also have some hidden motive. President also needs to somehow legitimize his status, not just stay in power, in order to show that he is not just a legal leader of nation, but to show that some part of the electorate support this initiative.
What do regular people on the streets of Almaty and Shymkent think about extending the president's term in office by another 10 years?
I think he's going to be too old. I'm sorry, but he's already 70 years old. Nazarbayev is okay, not good, not bad. That's a decent term. We might not survive after 2012. Not only until 2020, let him stay until death. There's no need for a referendum. There are defined terms and we already conducted one, so I think that's enough. I don't know. Yes, we need one because he cares about us. Maybe he should rule eternally, not only until 2020. No, I think that he should leave. Well, we probably need a new president because he did everything he could.
President's administration declined the request for a meeting with residents of the South Kazakhstan district Saragash. Moreover, the office didn't even accept a petition asking for Nazarbayev's help. For already 3 years, villages from the settlement that suffered a massive flood request help in completing the construction of their damaged houses. On Thursday, too, Saragash residents were scheduled to meet with Nazarbayev's assistant Murat Tajan. The meeting, however, never took place.
The activists of the South Kazakhstan district Saragash went straight to the president's administrations from the railway station. With 2 bags with almost 500 appeals from the victims of the floods, they head to the meeting with the Secretary of Security Council. Unfortunately, the names of the activists were not on the list of invited. We are ready for a national revolt. The people were irritated to that extent. We all hoped and waited for help from the government. Instead, we are fed with promises for almost 3 years. The government should fear the people. Instead, the authorities do not serve people, and everything is vice versa. According to Gulnar Jumabayeva, the meeting was scheduled for December 23rd. The woman received a notification recently when activists in course of 3 years numerously wrote to Akorda saying that the residents of Jana Daur village for already 3 years live in dilapidated houses. Everyone has a conclusion of the expertise indicating that the houses are no longer suitable for living. It has all the appeals, decrees of the prosecutor and letters to Kultasov. They have proving documents that there were violations. However, the case was hushed and nothing was undertaken. In February of 2008, as a result of flood, several villages of Saragash district were flooded. During the flood, 1 person died. The number of victims exceeded 12,000. 260 houses were destroyed by the emergency. 400 buildings were severely damaged. The government has allocated $3.5 million to compensate and restore houses. However, the finances have not reached all of the victims. Their problem was avoided because the money had to be shared among the territorial department, state administration and the general prosecutor's office. They should not point at Dutbaev and Merkel because everything is quite obvious and clear. Meanwhile, desperate activists stood in front of the president's administration for 3 hours until state officials came out and promised to organize a meeting with the Secretary of the Security Council on Friday.
On Thursday, mothers and wives of inmates picketed the parliament demanding to stop tortures in Kazakhstan's prisons. Women said inmates are subjected to frequent humiliation and denied visits from their families. The MP said they will help, but not immediately. Although picketers claim the longer it will take to deal with the matter, the worse the consequences will be.
The national procession to meet with the MPs. Desperate mothers and wives of convicted have picketed the building of the parliament on Thursday, demanding to stop tortures in Kazakh prisons. According to women, the convicts are daily beaten and injured. My brother is disabled of the 3rd category while he was healthy when imprisoned. The protesters were received by the MP of the lower chamber of the parliament, Aygul Solovyova. The MP offered to start inspections of prisons and involve lawyers. However, she didn't promise quick results. She assures that if the attempts to bring order in Kazakh prisons will fail, it will prove the formal nature of the recent OSCE summit in Astana and its declaration. If we fail, then I think the Astana Declaration, which we all signed and which we organized, will really prove its formal character. The MP promised to start the work in the beginning of the next year, referring to busy schedule in the parliament. Solovyova assured that she will activate the fight for the rights of convicts in February of 2011. However, the relatives of convicts doubt that their close ones will survive until then.
This is it for now. Thank you for watching. Join us tomorrow for more. Goodbye.